See you, Bill.
And as I mentioned a moment ago, we're having high winds here. When we had them the other day, the internet got knocked out a few times. So while I have a UPS on my computer and everything else, outside the house, there's not a UPS on the internet. So if the neighborhood goes out and I lose you, I'll say good, I'll apologize in advance. Oh, we lost Don, but I'm back in here. Yeah, I mean, the Santa Ana winds are just a phenomena that we have to deal with this time of year, but at least it keeps it nice and clear air-wise, other than the dust and what it does for your allergies. So,
I'm sorry, where do they come from, Bill? The Santa Ana winds?
The desert. Basically, you have a difference in air pressure. This time of year, it happens every year. The desert and I'm on the other side of a mountain pass, have very, very different air pressures, and it's higher out there, lower than here. So it blows through the mountains. So like anything else, you have, this much wind coming, and now all of a sudden it's got to go through that much of a mountain pass. It just really accelerates. It also, as it does it, when it goes through that compression of going through it, it tends to dry everything out. So you get incredibly dry conditions with very high winds. So Carol and I are out walking the dogs earlier, and the forecast was saying, 40-mile-an-hour gusts, and some of them were, I think we were definitely exceeding that. So the dogs don't seem to mind so much, but it's very they're very strong. We have a pool cover solar blanket that floats on top of the pool, and the it used to just float there, and every now and then the neighbor would come over and ask, "Do you want your solar cover back?" So it's on a roller now, big heavy metal roller. And Carol the other day said, "Oh, by the way, the wind is blowing the pool cover and the metal roller into the pool." So it's that sort of strong. So it's fun.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate folks joining. We're just going to do a little bit of a show and tell type thing. So I know Joey has a whole bunch of stuff to show. Tom, do you have stuff on your books that you're able to share with us? Great. And any other folks putting up their hands of things that they would like to show? Oh, Beth, okay, great.
Oh, great.
And what's that?
I said, oh, great. Beth has a lot of great stuff.
Great, and I got a few odds and ends I took some pictures of to share as well. So since this was Joey's idea, why don't we start with Joey? And it looks like you've definitely covered the table there with some odds.
Well, yeah, I ransacked my wife's dining room to put everything. We had just done a show at the Paramount Theater, so a lot of this stuff is not put into the storage yet. So I figured you might like to see it. I'll go through each of them fast so I don't cut into everyone's time. And if there's questions, you can ask. This is everybody knows what this is. This is one of the Blue Globes from the New York State Pavilion. And what's great about this is the workman went up and actually got it for me. I'll let you up. It's completely intact. And when they were working on the decks, I believe in the 90s or the end of the 90s, I asked one of the workmen if he would go up with a little disposable camera and take pictures for me up there. And he says, well, I can't do that, but if you want one of the things up there, I'll get one for you. And he did, and he got me this. So
do you know if that's one of the fair ones or one from the Wiz?
I don't know, because it is made of glass. I think the Wiz, I think they were made of plastic, I believe. But this one's really heavy, and it's got a lot of grooves on it where it was actually attached. So, but I'll put this over here. Next item here, I don't know if you can see this too well. This is one of the little miniature Roman soldiers from the galley sequence in Ben-Hur.
Oh, wow. So,
yeah, and they were created by the MGM prop department and Italian artisans who actually painted them. There's a remnant of paint on them, and he also has in here, I have to touch them with gloves, but he also has a little shield. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, it's a little shield. And And that's one of the Roman soldiers. And what they would do is they would put them on the deck of a miniature, well, not really miniature, but pretty gigantic prop ship. And they would have these props, these soldiers on the decks in the long shots. And then in the close-ups, everybody's moving around, but in the long shots, all these soldiers are standing still. And some of them were actually attached with springs so that they would look like from a distance they were moving. So I'm just going to, can you see that okay?
Is there any way we could get that closer to the camera? Because I see the whole room, but the model's
Yeah,
kind of
I'm
small.
gonna-
There we
I'm
go.
gonna-
Thank you.
I'm gonna put it as close as I can. There you go. I can't take it out. It's in a display case. So is that good for you?
Yeah, looks good.
Much better. Much better.
Okay.
Just
All right,
real quick, I'm gonna mute folks here 1 second, because I switched to speaker view, so that the picture is larger than just the the small shot. But then anytime anybody coughs or anything, it switches away from Joey. So I'm gonna mute everybody, and then basically here I'll unmute you, Joey, or you might have to unmute yourself. Let me just see here real quick. Yeah. You can unmute if you do have something you want to, excuse me, say, feel free, just hold the space bar, ask your question, and then we'll remute you, but that way our focus will stay on Joey's presentation. Thanks.
Okay. I really can't get it down, but I hope you can see this. I don't have too many Disney artifacts, but this is an original tombstone from Hocus Pocus, which was produced by Disney. And we love displaying this because Hocus Pocus is so big, especially now that they made a second one. Are you all seeing this okay?
What does it say, Joey? It's I see white, and then
Yeah,
something.
it's got carved in names. I assume of some of the characters. It has Mary here, and it's let me see if I can get it down. Yeah. It's made of a heavy foam.
Ah, okay, it's a fake tombstone.
Yeah, it's a very heavy, and these were used in the graveyard sequence in Hocus Pocus.
Neat.
So I'll put that over here. This real fast, I can show you this to you really close up. This is from one of the last burlesque houses in New York City, from the Bowery, 267 Bowery. It was called Sammy's Burlesque. And what's great about this is a piece of sheet music that was hanging in Sammy's that we have the photo of. Sammy's started in the 20s and it closed down in 1969. And here is a piece of the ceiling and a piece of the drapery. And what was great about Sammy's is that it collected some of the most bizarre characters in New York at the time. A collection of drunks, a collection of actors, a collection of eccentrics with names like Boulevard Mary and Tugboat Annie. And what was the other one? Greenpoint Gert. So this is an original piece of sheet music, along with a postcard and a matchbook from that. The area is now completely transformed. So there's actually no trace of it anymore. The building's still there though. I'll hold this really close up. This is a piece of the Brontosaurus from King Kong. And this is the what's left of the underbelly. It completely fell apart. And I was good friends with Forrest J. Ackerman for years as a kid. And he put this in packages when the animation model was falling apart. And he would send me a package every other month. But I think it was mainly to stop me from writing him every month, because I would write him like 2 times a month as a kid. And I knew him to the day he died. He called me, he only knew me as that kid from Brooklyn. So that's a piece of the brontosaur.
What's that made out of, Joey?
It's made out of foam rubber, and it smells like burnt sugar, and that's what happens to latex and foam as it deteriorates. And this was sprayed so that it would keep a little bit better. But if you watch King Kong like we do on Thanksgiving, and when you see the brontosaurus, you'll know a little piece of him is with us. Really fast, this is this guy here. I can push him right up to the camera. This is the original conception of the apes that Kubrick used in 2001, A Space Odyssey. He originally went for this look. This was an Aboriginal look, but the problem was the costume people couldn't hide their private parts for a rated G release. So they went with apes instead. They went for the furry suits instead, which worked a whole lot better. But this is the original conception. They were supposed to be Aboriginal early proto-humans. And I'll put this over here. Real quick, I'll hold this up. This is a piece of the 1906 earthquake, a piece of heavy, heavy marble that a gentleman in San Francisco was using as a doorstop. And he just gifted it to me. 1906, yeah, rubble from I guess they pull this stuff out of every now and then, it like Flushing Meadow, it comes to the surface. And many pieces are in dumps. And this was also found in a dump. I'll hold this up. This is a candy tong from Huffner's Candy Company that was found in San Francisco in a dump. And this is a relic from the 1906 earthquake. And lastly, this is how Beth and I met. Here's a piece of the Aquacade seat that everybody keeps asking me to show again. We've got a whole bunch of these when the Aquacade was torn down. And little kids that would come to our museum, they wouldn't know what the Aquacade is or was. So I just say it's a piece of deck chair from the Titanic. And they love that. So, and that's that. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Now I can clean all this stuff up and put it back in storage.
No. What of all the stuff in your collection, what would you say your favorite thing is?
Well, we have a piece from, we have a sword and a riding crop from Birth of a Nation, which is, I think that's the oldest piece. But a lot of the Kong stuff that I had gotten is just, to me, it's worth its weight in gold. And a lot of that, and we have a lot of Planet of the Apes, stuff, including a huge piece of the cage that I had smuggled out of Malibu State Park when I went there on my 2 trips to California. So we have a big piece of that. And of course, my dad, who, there's a picture of, my dad was in The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and On the Waterfront. And my mom and dad were in Hitchcock's The Wrong Man. And this is a hook that was with my dad. He was a longshoreman. And this is his longshoreman's hook that was with him on a lot of those shoots.
That's really
he had 4 seconds in the movie. So anyway, but I thank you. I don't want to take up too much of the group's time, but thank you.
Joey, I want to know your most harrowing experience of gathering any of these props.
Well, getting a lot of them home, was a challenge at times. Going in dumpsters. I have a few of the heads that were used in the Twilight Zone. They are mannequin heads that were used in episodes like the After Hours and stuff like that. And I got those out of a dumpster at CBS. They were just being thrown away. What I will say is, if you see my collection when we do display shows, a lot of it was destined to be trashed. And that's kind of the legacy that Hollywood had with its movie props. And a lot of people have saved things. And there's people that have unbelievable collections. I mean, 100 times more than what I have. And I'm glad that they saved this stuff, you know?
That's neat.
Yeah, so that's the thing. And then sneaking, a lot of in many ways, it's like me jumping the fences at our beloved park, because sometimes you have to kind of get in there and just get what you want. But if not, it's trashed. So, you know.
Yeah. Hey, I love your shirt.
Yeah, this was for Cliff London, if he's on. This
Yeah,
was our.
I don't think he's with us today.
Yeah, this was for our World's Fair gathering that hopefully we'll be able to do again. I know a lot of people are asking me about it, you know, and we just didn't feel safe doing a big group gathering right now, but perhaps soon, who knows?
Great. Well, thanks, Joey. Anybody else? Any questions or observations or things you'd like to donate to Joey?
Oh, and the Aquacade seat, that's how I met Beth Bramlett.
Yeah, how's that?
Yeah, she was doing her show. If you remember, Beth, you were doing your show on the General, the locomotive, and that's when I guess I brought the seat on screen, and we met that way. That was great.
That's great.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Joey.
You're welcome.
Tom, did you want to talk? Tom has written a book that he sent me. He was gracious enough to send me a copy of a number of years ago, and we were talking the other day about something else, and suggested he might want to share some thoughts on it. Tom, do you need to be made co-host, or do you just holding it up, or how would you like it?
Oh, share screen, yeah.
Okay, so here, let me make you a co-host for a second.
The few, the proud, the Kataka host.
Hey, you should be able to share your screen now, Tom.
Yeah, I wish I was an expert at this. Because this isn't what I was expecting to see. Huh, so I wonder if I do it like that. Oh, now the share screen went away.
Should still be there. Are you on a PC or a Mac?
PC Ed.
Yeah, so it should be down at the bottom, green button, share screen.
Yeah, it was, and I hit it, and it was sharing screen, and then I managed to close it. Wonder if it's this one of you. No, do it. So I'm really sorry, guys. So, are you seeing anything now?
Nope,
Oh, that's not
I'm
good.
seeing you.
Oh, sorry.
And a really nice looking clock.
Oh, yeah. What? Anybody else have their Christmas trees up? We're started. So I've got. So Bill, I had you up, and I can see your face,
Right.
but it's not.
Yeah, if you click on share screen, it should ask you what application you want
There.
to open. And then if you have, where is your presentation? Is it photos or is it a PDF or what is it?
PowerPoint.
Okay.
Is it on now?
There you go.
There you go.
Oh, whoops!
Now we
Sorry,
got
I
it.
did it. Okay. Okay, so I wrote this book called The University of Earth. Do this, save the planet. And it seems like no matter what area of expertise people have, you know, what science they're in or where they are in life, they might be great environmentalists and stuff, but they don't understand what the problem is. So that's what I spent a little time on yesterday, you know, preparing this is just trying to explain why it's a problem and what should be being done to solve the crisis. So as you see on the screen, you know, a long time ago in a galaxy not so far away, give or take a year or two, our solar system formed about 4.533 billion years ago. Our best theories suggested it formed when a shockwave from a nearby exploding star called a supernova turned the dense clouds of interstellar gases and dust into stars, planets, and moons. Their form is constantly in flux from impact events from various sized meteors and their own makeup. It's like fast forward 2 billion years, and the Earth started forming single cell organisms. The Earth was on fire at that time. The air was really caustic, you know, with ammonia, sulfur, methane, carbon dioxide from volcanic eruptions of lava and ash. The skies were dark, and our second atmosphere continued to form. Photosynthesis in these small creatures, it was before chlorophyll started in, you know, in algae. They believe now that CO2 is being turned into oxygen, even back then. So then fast forward another billion years, and there was evidence of multicellular organisms. Still, though, you'd die in an instant if you were to time travel back into that time, you know, because of the caustic air and heat and everything. And then I've got you fast forwarding another billion years, and this is when, you know, the Earth really starts capturing, turning CO2 and other carbons, methane and all, were turned into oxygen. And that's when the blue-green algae started to appear. And I just have the timeline on the bottom, you know, showing you, you know, when the system, our solar system was formed, and then Earth formed, like, you know, like I just talked about in the text. So there were no reptiles, birds, dinosaurs, or mammals could exist in that atmosphere to that time. And then about 3,500 million years ago came the blue algae, and because it thrived, it created an environment that was more conducive to life as we know it. So then fast forward to just 470 million years ago, and were a lot of algae, mosses, and ferns. They sequestered so much carbon that the Earth was plunged into its first ice age. But you can imagine they just thrived. It was like fuel for them, you know, all this carbon that we use as fuel now, you know, these organisms were using it back then. So just let's see, I can't even read all of that, but anyway, surprisingly many, I can't remember what I wrote, the scene until about, oh, mankind didn't. No, it wasn't mankind, sorry, dinosaurs appeared on the scene about 500,000 years ago. I said, even more surprisingly, it was only about 250,000 years ago that mankind appeared. And I don't know if you all think of that, but, you know, like, when did mankind first show up on Earth? And I would think that you think about all the evolution that happened, and all that 250,000 years doesn't sound like enough time, but that's where, you know, anthropologists put us. So we owe our existence to the plants that use photosynthesis. At the time, it was considered to permanently gobble up and biosequester all the carbon and create an oxygen-rich atmosphere that was conducive to life. And all that carbon was buried in bogs, you know, glaciers, there were, you know, plate shifts, you know, lava, landslides, earthquakes, all sorts of things, you know, put all that carbon underground. And then you look back and you're thinking, well, it took millions and millions and millions of years for that to happen. But now you fast forward to 200 years ago when the industrial age started, and we've managed to unearth, a major portion of all that carbon that was stored away. And again, on the bottom, I've got the timeline of that large first ice age. And then some people say that we're currently still in an ice age. But most people agree that it ended about 20,000 years ago. So all the conditions that had come about so that the animals that we know, could exist. And then just, what has gone wrong? And it's the earth plant spent millions of years sequestering all the carbon and got it all the way down to 75 parts per million. And today those levels are at 415 parts per million. So I think that's the one thing that a lot of people, especially, there's not many climate deniers out there anymore, but those that are out there, just say, oh, we're just going through a cycle, it's just, same old, it's all gonna, just get back to normal. But this is the biggest problem, and it's the greenhouse gases of methane and carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide and carbon monoxide. I mean, it's just even water is considered a greenhouse gas, and those things aren't going to go away by themselves. So that's why people talk about doing trying to sequester carbon. So I've mentioned here about how the oceans have become much more acidic, and you guys are probably aware that we're something like 85% of the coral has disappeared in the oceans, and it's because of the carbonic acid in the ocean. They can't form anymore. That it softens the calcium, and the coral can't grow. And then the biggest problem, of course, with greenhouse gases for us is the oceans tend to be more stagnant. They gather a lot more heat. So when you think of like the Gulf of Mexico and Baja area, just different parts of the ocean, the water sits longer and it heats up more. And when it heats up more and then the storms form, the clouds are just like multiple times bigger than they used to be. And that makes the storms more intense. So, they're carrying much more of a wallop. And one of the things that I was kind of interested in, and it was really hard to research this, but I was just saying, well, doesn't that mean there's going to be a lot more lightning, with these taller, bigger clouds? And I finally found an article in the National Geographic that talked about how lightning strikes have more than doubled in the last 15 years. And of course, those lightning strikes cause a lot more wildfires, and that exacerbates the problem even more, right? By putting more smoke and carbon dioxide in the air. And wildfires used to be measured in acres, and they're now measured in thousands of acres. Sorry, my wife just got home. It's not the mailman, Bill.
It's okay, my dog is reacting to it.
Oh boy. So the solution that I personally believe is the best is this PhD Stephen Mayfield, who have come to know, who works at San Diego State, and he says, algae is the silver bullet to solve our problems. And this is cover of the book, and the intention of the book is to go in and describe things that we can do to solve our climate crisis. And so what I've what I do in the book is I break up this University of Earth, and half of it would be a physical campus, and the other half would be all online. And the idea would be a worldwide university, and and there's ideas how that could start with existing universities and how they can work together. Yeah, sorry, this previous slide about electrification, I think it's interesting that we're doing a lot with electric cars and those kind of things, and now they throw things in like LED light bulbs that Bill doesn't like. But it's all of that effort together, it just would never be enough. So the thing that we should do, to me, is look at the history that I just explained to you, and the thing that cured the problem before were algae, mosses, ferns, trees, things that sequester carbon. And there's a lot of things that can be made out of all of those things. Where one of you probably have heard about how farm animals are emit a lot of methane after they eat, and so there's just ideas about how to deal with methane, and then these are direct ways that are really, really efficient. So I'm going to show a picture of the algae farms. There are lots of these all around the country. A lot of people don't even know what's being done in that way, but they create these algae ponds, and you see how they have a line in the center of each one. So what the water does, it circulates, in an oval like a racetrack, and paddles move the water, and they grow algae. The second picture, just kelp farms. There are 4,000 kelp farms as of last year around the world, and people use the kelp for all kinds of things. They make shoes. It's really popular as food. And when I was talking about the animals releasing methane, so one of the things they do with the algae is they mix it in salt or mineral blocks for like cattle, and they lick the mineral block, and then that keeps them from emitting methane, like some by 85%. There's so many things they do with the algae from the algae farms, and also, of course, these bioreactors that I show on the right. But pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, they have found that taking algae and mixing it in with the soil improves crop production by as much as 80%. So it just seems like it's a really good solution that we just need to be doing a lot more of it. And then I have a picture here of a algae bioreactor, and I put on here, it sounds kind of technical, but really it's just nothing more than a fish tank or a glass tube that grows algae. And there's a lot of exciting things being done in that arena. University of Kentucky takes the vented carbon dioxide from their power plant, and they run the vent through these glass tubes. So it's a really rich source of carbon dioxide that gets turned into oxygen.
Tom, is there a downside to the algae farms? Like, if you end up with lots of dead algae and you have to get rid of it, that sort of thing. Is there, anything that is a counter argument there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question that I'm glad you brought it up. The trick about algae is, you have to basically catch it at its peak growth. You can't really let it live out its life expenditure and die. So so yeah, and that is probably the number one thing keeping it from being adapted, in worldwide efforts, that of 100%, hey, why aren't we just doing algae? It's positively the best thing to do. And that's like a lot of people, when they hear the name or hear the word algae, they think of toxic algae blooms, that grow in our lakes and oceans. And again, if those wouldn't be growing if there wasn't pollution. So what'll spark an algae bloom is, like there's too much phosphorus from fertilizers in the ground or something that wash into the waterways, and then that creates the algae bloom. One really cool thing, Don's in Texas, and there in Corpus Christi, they have an algae farm in the river, and in that entire area in the Gulf of Mexico, there are no algae blooms anywhere near it, because the algae farm is taking all those all that food away from the algae that would create a toxic bloom out in the water. Here I've got this pictures of Celine Cousteau, Jacques Cousteau's daughter. She's probably doing more than anybody else in the world to use algae, and kelp is algae, and she's committed to she's going to sequester 50 million tons of carbon out of the oceans, and that she's got a 3-year plan to make that happen, which she's already probably well into the first year. But she's just fabulous. I've seen her speak, and she's just really gives you a lot of confidence that we're not doomed. There's a lot of hope. In my book, I also talk about this rock called olivine, and that's something that was discovered a while back, and it's in the Bahamas and areas like that. They're using a lot of olivine and it captures that. It's like an algae that's in a rock. It's like in the rock, and so as it captures the carbon dioxide, it actually stores it up in the rock. And then you've also probably heard about these machines that just take air and turn it into carbon rocks. If they do that, especially around Norway and the Scandinavian countries, that's a big thing that they do. So they just have fans that suck the air and turn them into these little black rocks. It's really cool, but very expensive. So the whole idea about it being the University of Earth is just about education, and I've got really I don't know, probably 50 different ideas of things that we can do to help educate people about algae and how to reverse and draw down the levels of carbon dioxide.
Yeah,
So
Tom.
one of the things I just think should be so easy is that universities would be able to offer a BS or a BA plus, and it would just mean that the student, while they're in college, spent a semester in a class having something to do with the environment. It could be writing software or doing marketing, just preparing educational programs for elementary schools and junior highs or something. There's just thousands and thousands of environmentally related things that they could do, and then that they would also then have to spend a semester out in the field where maybe they're helping to get rid of invasive species of plants, or you know, help work on a kelp farm, just do real things that then they would take with them, you know, for their whole lives,
All right,
and
Tom,
hopefully teach their
I'd like
kids.
to ask, how can people get the copy of your book, or do you have any website or anything with instructions on what they can do to try to, move this sort of thing forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And any of you that want a copy of my book, I didn't write it to make money. I've been giving them out to people. So if you want a copy, just email me your address and phone number, and I'll ship one off to you.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really a very well done book.
Thank you,
Besides
Bill.
the text and everything, the layout and the photos and everything, I thought you did an outstanding job on it.
Thanks, Bill.
That's fabulous and very generous of you, Tom. It's very interesting. I'm so impressed.
Well, thank you. So
Carolyn just mentioned that she got a note from the post office, the book's being delivered today.
who did?
Carolyn Peterson.
Oh, Carolyn. All right, cool. Yeah, she had a PO box.
Yeah.
So I'm almost done. It's just there's a company, Algae Biomass Organization. They have about 4,000 members, I believe, and it's all about algae and all the products that are made from algae. A lot of people, when they travel, they buy carbon offsets to offset their travels. Like when we went to Africa last year, we bought carbon offsets for all of our air travel. This is, like me, one of the main things that just makes sense. And I can see someday where every roof, that has a furnace or water heater or something that burns methane will run that methane through a tube that goes through the bioreactor and produces oxygen, and that there'll be companies that will just come along like pool cleaners, right, and collect your algae and distribute it to some of these ideas that that are being done now. That's the pharmaceuticals. The number one thing I love is the compost and mulch. They make bird food and all kinds of animal food, of course, and nutraceuticals, food for livestock and food for people. And then most of all, which is just unfathomable to me, and that is that there's not a single company out there right now that sells carbon credits based on algae growth. And I just, I wish I wasn't retired. I'd start that company. That's it. So this is.
That's really great. Pete, folks have questions or things you could ask Tom? And again, if you send them the address, you can put it in the chat and send it to him. It's really a good work that he's put together.
Thanks, Bill.
Looks great.
How do I not share anymore?
Just click on let's see, view options. I think I can stop you. Stop
Okay.
participant sharing.
Oh.
Yeah, it's interesting because stuff like kelp. I think there's actually part of kelp that they use to make things like ice cream. It's also
Yeah.
you don't realize.
Yeah. So that's the book. It's a tabletop style book and has a dust jacket. There's almost every picture in the book.
I have a question.
Sure.
A lot of the things you've shown requires some infrastructure to grow the algae and so forth. But I remember seeing some experiments about promoting the growth of algae in the open ocean. What do you have to compare about that?
Well, in the last moment, I mentioned this ABO, it's Algae Biomass Organization. If you contact them, it's just abo.org. they have people that help you with everything, every step of the way. So if you were to want to start a kelp farm or you want to start an algae farm, they help. Like here in Salt Lake City, I thought, well, that's what I'll do. You know, I had some money ahead, and I thought, well, I'll do an algae farm. And I basically got, convinced that I couldn't do it on the scale that, would make a dent. So I abandoned the idea. But it's also difficult in some areas to get use of water, because like where I live, water is, we're in a drought, serious drought. And it became obvious really quick that they weren't going to share water with me for anything. So, but they have attorneys that'll help you set up. If you're a veteran, you can get a company and expertise for free. There's absolutely no charge to set up a business, and yeah, they have the attorneys that will write everything up, and they'll they'll get the expertise they need. Does that help answer that? Or
Well, no, rather than individual projects or companies like that, I had seen experiments where they provide missing nutrients just out in the open ocean. I think iron was one of them, to promote algae growth, which seems to me has a greater possibility of making a dent in the global carbon dioxide load. But I haven't seen much about that. But I wondered if you had any thing to tell us about what experiments have been done.
well, I guess I'm not sure. There's. I mean, are you talking about like seeding algae in the ocean? How to get it to grow?
Yeah, if the things you presented are great because they have lots of useful byproducts. But if it's really a global crisis that we have to spend money on rather than making profit on, then the oceans are big, and so it seems like promoting widespread algae growth in the ocean could be part of the solution. So that's
Yeah,
I
no,
was just asking because I've heard of some experiments,
I think it's
small
moved.
scale, where they determine what nutrients are missing and add those to open ocean water.
Yeah, well, you don't. I mean, everything's already in the ocean that you need to grow algae. People that want to accelerate it will use things like carbonate, but it really it isn't necessary, and they'll do that just to speed along the results of their experiments like you're talking about. But people that are growing kelp, and there's so many kinds of kelp, you guys have seen this. There's kelp like rubber mats, the kelp that looks like sponges, but the most common that we're used to, there are the brown and green and orange kelps, blue kelp. And yeah, there's everything's already in the ocean that they don't need to feed it anything.
Oh,
And and a lot of uses. I mean, they make shoes, and they're making skis, surfboards, it's just, oh, one of the best uses is they make clinkers to make concrete, and they found that concrete made with these algae clinkers, it takes a little bit longer to cure, but it's like the best concrete you could ever use, like to make a swimming pool or anything, because it has more flexibility in it, and it lasts way longer than our normal concrete, with Portland cement. So
Thank you.
there's so many things being done with algae. It'll blow your mind if you're really interested in some of these things like you're talking about. Go to that abo.org, and they're very friendly. It's out of Minnesota, and there's, like I said, something like 4,000 members around the world.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. But I tell you, you're making me feel guilty because I spent a couple weeks this summer getting all the algae out of my pool. So
I know. I know. It's like, yeah.
well, thanks. Again, if folks, again, we don't want to bankrupt Tom, but I would encourage you, if you're interested in the subject, ask him for a copy of the book. Then maybe you could send him some money, at least for the postage or something.
Oh no, I have it. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Beth,
Tom.
are you up to talking about whatever you'd like to show us today?
Sure, mine are not nearly as interesting as the other two, but I brought a few books out of my son's rare book collection to show. So the first one I'm going to show is called Our Canal in Panama. Can you see this?
Yeah.
So it's a very slim volume. We were in a bookstore in Blue Ridge, Georgia, up in North Georgia back in the spring, and my son loves used books, and he found this little volume. And so we started looking at it, and we realized that in the back, it has several pages that that describe what the larger volume of this book would look like. And it has some pages where a book salesman could take this around and use this as a way to describe what the full volume is going to look like. And he could store the name, address, the price. There are two different volumes of this book that were going to be available, one that was cloth bound, one that was leather bound. And they would use this just as a sample to sell books. And so we were able to find the actual book. This is the cloth bound version. And so we found these are called salesman's dummies. And we just thought it was kind of an interesting thing to collect, kind of a niche thing to collect related to books. So we found several others. Here's one called History of the Johnstown Flood. It's also a little thin volume, has that same sort of description and a space to write down subscribers in the back. This one actually has one subscriber written in. I think there's only one volume of this particular book, which we do have. There's the full History of the Johnstown Flood. This one I think is really interesting. It's called History of Our War with Spain. And one thing that I thought was interesting about it does have some pictures in it that were included in the final volume, but it also has at the very back, behind the pages that list the subscriber and address and all that, it has a sample of what the binding would look like. So it's got this like Moroccan leather binding. We don't have a copy of that one. We have a copy of the cloth bound book, but my son volunteers one day a week at the Rare Book Museum at Kennesaw State University, which is down the road from our house. And they actually have a copy of the leather bound that has that same binding that's in the back that I just showed you. This one is interesting. We don't have one of the full books that goes along with it. It's a soft cover book, which all the others were hardback, and it's called The Great Events of Famous Historians, but it has several different options in the back for bindings. So a little bit hard to show, but it's got like 4 or 5 different choices that someone could select, and different price points. So we've got just a couple others of those. We've got one called The Memoir of Williams Jennings Bryan, and one called, this one's interesting, Our National Calamity of Fire, Flood, and Tornado. So, oops, just fell. But I thought those were interesting. We hadn't seen those before, these salesman's dummies. We thought they were just sort of unusual and just a sort of an odd thing to collect, but it's interesting to see the different bindings they offer. And You can just picture a salesman going around with a trunk full of these dummies and using these to sell books that he would then distribute once the book was actually released.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had never heard of the concept. I've known, that they would do things like the guy that would sell cast iron stoves might take a small cast iron stove around with him. You see them all the
Right.
time on like Pawn Stars or something where they're showing a miniature apothecary or something like that. But it's really neat. I hadn't, it's a good idea. Rather than carrying around a trunk full of giant books, carry around small books.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. We just hadn't seen any before. And it was just sort of, interesting that we happened upon one and realized what it was. And then he has been able to collect several more.
Isn't that the trouble though? You find one thing and then all of a sudden more. Like
Right.
behind me, it doesn't show because I got the virtual background on, but on top of the file cabinet behind me, I have about 18 bottles. I can grab one of them real quick. Hang on. Let's see if I can grab this one here. I came up with,
Fabulous. Fabulous, Beth.
what's that?
And that was those are really interesting artifacts. Fabulous.
They're just unusual.
Yeah, I came across
Yeah.
the fact that there was a Cotter bottling company in Cotter, Arkansas. And this is an actual bottle of old soda, which I'm not going to uncap and try it. But then I found out that there was a Cotter bottling company in Brooklyn, and I've got about 18
That's right.
bottles sitting up on top of the filing cabinet here from different Cotter companies. So this is the Cotter Ice and Bottling Company of Cotter, Arkansas. And like I said, saw one, had to have it. Now I don't know what the hell I do with 18 Cotter bottles. But I may start my own root beer company.
That's right, though, Bill. There was a Cotter soda in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I've got some of their bottles sitting here, but this one still has some of the soda in it. So, it's a little flat. I mean, it's 100 years old. I don't think I'm going to try and drinking it, but it was just kind of neat to find one that was still capped and, it's half evaporated, but it's still there. Well, that was pretty neat, Beth. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Beth.
And let's see, Carolyn has some odds and ends to show us.
Well, I hadn't thought of it until after you posted your message, but I don't know if you guys can see this. It's a commemorative plate from the 1968 premiere of 2001: A Space Odyssey, made of Wedgwood,
Wow.
from Wedgwood. And I've been trying to figure out, how rare these are, because they're listed on eBay and every place anywhere from like $90 to, almost $1,000. And it's just it's an ashtray, but it's something called Wedgwood Jasperware. And on the back, I don't know if you guys can see this. It tells you
yeah.
what it was made for. Yeah.
They-
So it's
they
been
are
kicking around on my bookshelves for quite a while. And I just realized, as I'm going through and I'm trying to kind of clear off my bookshelves, but I'm not going to sell this. But I was just amazed because, I've been trucking it around for years and years, from dorm room to house to house to house. It's kind of cool.
Did
Yeah,
you
that's a
get it
great
at the
artifact.
premiere?
Pardon me?
Did you get it at the premiere or did you acquire?
No,
it
somebody gave it
after?
to me as a gift, who was out there. They said this one came from from a London premiere that they were
Yeah.
giving away in London, but I think they gave them away in LA too. So on the back, it says 2001: A Space Odyssey in Cinerama, filmed in Super Panavision and Technicolor. So you guys all know what that is.
Yeah.
Right.
Pretty cool.
I think it played at the big Cinerama Theater out where you guys are.
On
Um,
Sunset. Yeah.
Yeah, in Brooklyn, it played at the RKO Albee. So we got to see a squeezed down version of 2001. But
Yeah, I
that's
think we saw it. We saw it in a Cinerama theater in Denver, I think, and then we saw it in Boulder in a little shoebox theater like you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
That's a
And the other-
fabulous artifact, Carolyn. Yeah.
I had
Hold on
no
to
idea
that.
it was that valuable. Like, somebody gave it to me as a gift, and I don't remember what it was for, but it's pretty blue, and they do
Yeah.
show up on eBay from time to time.
That's neat.
So then the other thing, there's two other things. So this thing, I don't even know if you can tell. It's a challenge coin. And so I was working on board a cruise ship, and I don't remember which one. I used to do cruise lecturing until the pandemic started. And I gave a talk about the history of the space program, in 30 minutes, right? I had to go through a lot of it. And this guy came up and he said, here, I want to give you this. It's a commemorative coin that was struck from material that they made space shuttles from. And it's commemorating Space Shuttle Endeavour and the launch of the Space Hab maiden voyage. And I don't know that you can actually make the
Yeah.
details out. But I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know how many of these were made, but he came up and said, here, you know, you need to have this. And so I'll need it for my challenge coin collection.
Oh, that's neat.
And then the third thing is this book, since we're talking about books. I don't know how many of you know about the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. They're expanding it right now. This is written by Percival Lowell. And Percival was really, really into the whole idea that there was life on Mars and he was going to find it. And so he wrote this book talking about Mars, and it's full of little sketches like this that he made at the telescope of Mars. And he made some fairly detailed ones. I don't know if you can see them or not. There are lines in this that he claimed were kind of like highways or transportation routes or canals that the Martians would actually be bringing things across the surface of Mars so that they could get to, like shipping food or whatever they needed to ship. So anyway, I've been collecting old Percival Lowell books, and I now have 2 copies of this, and I'm about to get one called Mars is the Abode of Life that he wrote. And of course, he died before we really had good images of Mars, but he'd already been pretty much discredited by a lot of the astronomical community. But it's interesting to go back and read his work to see, where the modern thoughts about Mars kind of diverged from the thoughts that really began in the late 1800s about life being on Mars and these canals and, and what we were going to find if we ever did actually get to Mars, and how it's so very different today. So that's what I had.
It's interesting. You read a book like that, which was the state of the art and all the knowledge at the time, and you wonder if you go 100 years from now, if somebody's going to be looking back at what we're saying about the things we're seeing from Hubble or the Webb or something, and they're going to, oh man, can you believe they thought that at this point in time? You know, I mean, because I'm sure back then they knew they were 100% right, just like we know we're 100% right. Be interesting in 100 years to see how much we were right or not.
Oh yeah, no, even as a student in astronomy and astrophysics, we'd run across really old ideas. There are now people going back and looking through old data to see if there are, pre-discovery images of this, that, or the other in the sky. And so some of the old data from the Voyager missions and from previous to that are now being looked over again for more objects, which is kind of cool. I mean, so that data actually exists. It was for a long time on tape, I think. And now I think it's all been digitized, but yeah, 100 years from now, they're going to look at that and go, well, we actually go to these places now. I'm hoping, right? We'll have warp drive by then or something. But yeah.
Yeah. It's like the thing where they dig up some village and they decide this is what this was used for, that was used for. I don't know if you ever saw the thing where somebody did a spoof of archaeologists digging up an ancient motel. And they have the whole thing about, what the strip sanitized your protection meant and what magic fingers device was, but they did it all from the perspective of 200 years from now, somebody uncovering a 1960s vintage motel. It was kind of fun.
Yeah,
it's all mysteries. I remember reading that.
There was a really cool, go ahead.
I'm sorry, it was called Motel of Mysteries. I remember reading.
Yeah.
It was funny though.
There was a really funny science fiction story written some years ago about these archaeologists at this dump. And they're on another planet and they're looking at all this stuff. It's not a dump, it's a dig that they're doing. And they find all these things, and there are these pictures etched into the walls of people walking up, and there's a man dressed in a special outfit, and they're handing him a coin or something special. And then they walk in, but they don't go out. And so the archaeologists are going, well, it was a temple, and this is where people came and they prayed, they paid the priest, and they went in there and then they sacrificed themselves. Well, as they found a machine that would let them look back into time, and they look at it, and it turns out it was actually the garbage dump, and they were paying the guy to go in and dump their garbage and then going out the back door. It's always taught me the value of don't make assumptions.
That's funny.
That's like that, Bill, that old George Carlin skit where he claimed that archaeologists have dug up the actual receipt for the Last Supper. And, and they found that only 11 people put in.
I've been to some of those lunches, that's for sure. Oh, well, that brings back a memory from one guy that did that all the time at work. Boy, that's really funny. I haven't heard that thing for years, but yeah, you're bringing back some memories there. Great, thanks. I've got a couple odds and ends I can show here to share a screen. I wanted to, let's see, share screen. This is something I picked up about 10 years ago that I still have to find some place to hang it on the wall here in my office. But it's one of the road signs from the '64 World's Fair. So I mentioned before about John Pender. His father, Mike Pender, worked at the fair, and he was one of the first hired and one of the last fired. And during the time they were taking the fair apart, Mike was just basically going around saying, "I'll take it. Can I have that? Can I have this?" So he ended up with huge amounts of stuff. And then his son, John, has been selling it for years. And a couple of years ago, he had about 6 of these signs for sale. And I figured I love the Carousel of Progress, look forward to the future. So I ended up with my very own Avenue of Progress sign. I just have to find some spot on the wall to hang it, that if we have an earthquake, it won't come off the wall and hit me in the head. But that was kind of a fun acquisition. So since I was trying to figure out how to decorate my office, I just thought I'd pop up a few things I have hanging on the walls here. So we have some Disney artwork. We're down, as you remember this scene, he's imitating Captain Hook and, with Tiger Lily and, "Let her free, Mr. Smee," and Mr. Smee would let her free. And, "What are you doing, Mr. Smee? Lock her up again." "No, I said let her free." So anyway, that was kind of a fun piece to come across. And then next to it is Lady and the Tramp, kind of an iconic scene. I was not able to get the background to go with it, but this is actually about 3 different cells put together, the wine bottles and stuff, and the dogs and the spaghetti are in different layers. And overlooking, of course, the other side, I always got a kick out of poor Donald Duck. Every week, every day in the Mickey Mouse Club, when he hit that gong, something was going to happen to him, whether it was going to explode or it be a giant thing of pie or something. I remember as a kid waiting to see what was going to happen to Donald that day. So at least I have him getting ready for it. And this one I got a real kick out of because Chip and Dale are such small figures that their cells are usually small. But this is a pretty large one. And having played Chip many times at Disneyland, this was one of my favorites. I hung it up on the wall. And then this was a fun one. When my book came out on the Disney television, the Disney studio had a event to come and get your book signed, and put up a table outside the studio theater. And I didn't know if anybody would show up or not, but I was very gratified to see a nice long line. And my friend, if he's still on the call, Mike Clark, came by, took some pictures. But it was really great for me because I got to see a whole bunch of people I used to work with and could tell them, "Hi, thought I'd never amount to anything. Fooled you, wrote a book." So that was great fun. So it hangs on the wall over my TV. And this is just one I get a real kick out of. I was a real fan of Charlie Brown. And this is the original artwork to a Charlie Brown strip. And you know what I've discovered, Charlie Brown? I've discovered most people don't like me until they know me. And that's Schroeder, and Charlie says it's something like that with me too. And I'll see if I can zoom in on it here for the punchline. When people first meet me, they dislike me. Then after they get to know me, they hate me. So I just felt bad for poor Charlie. So he hangs up on the wall there. So anyway, it's just part of the silliness. I look around. I spend way too much time here in my office if I'm not out on the street. I know there's a couple of people saw the thing I posted yesterday. Let me just see if I can find that picture real quick. 1 second here. Yeah, let me just share screen on this one. Go back here. Share screen. Yesterday, we were on our way from one part of town to the other part of town, and we got a call that there's a car on fire. So we got down there, and it had burned pretty good. You can see the engine actually exploded. The hood got bent up. This was right across on the main street of town, right next to the busiest restaurant in town, which is a drive-in restaurant. So it made great fun. But we were saying, what the hell caused this guy's car to burn so much? And it was because he had a flamethrower in the back, and he had it fully fueled. The igniter, everything, he just had it switched to off. and evidently hit a bump and it switched to on, and he was driving along, and the next thing you know, the entire car was full of flame, and including his hair caught fire. So he was very, very lucky to get out. But when I got back to the station, they were all saying that that was the first flamethrower call that they can recall. So just the fun way you spend time out here in beautiful LA.
Bill, can you buy a flamethrower or can you make one?
Yeah, evidently it's legal, because I talked to the fire guys about it. I didn't know if I was going to have to, confiscate it or not. But the guy was on his way to take out a stand of bamboo. Really nice guy. I mean, he was no problem at all. I really felt bad for him, especially his father showed up not happy that he burned up the family car. But he was on his way to burn out bamboo, and that's what this thing is made for. They use it. You have bamboo. If you don't know it, it's a very invasive plant, and if you plant it, it will go underground, pop up other places, and it's really hard to get rid of. So gardeners will come by with one of these things and just scorch it and try to take it all out. It's the same sort of thing firefighters use for setting back fires and that sort of stuff. So Elon Musk, before he was destroying Twitter a couple of years ago, was selling flamethrowers, which, again, I live in a real high fire danger area. If I find somebody with a flamethrower, I'm not going to be happy. But the firemen say, yeah, they're not illegal. So the last we saw, we threw it through the back window of the car and took it away on the tow truck. And the guy's father was yelling at him. He never wanted to see that damn flamethrower again. It was a very bizarre way to spend your day. But
Hey, Bill, when you came back from the screen share, your image is quite blurry.
Is it?
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens. Let me stop video. See if that starts it again. That get any better?
Yes.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, whatever the camera, I think it's all just trying to save you from the shock of seeing, me too sharp.
Yeah, we had the Doris Day filter in.
Yeah,
So,
wax. Yeah.
Bill, you mentioned Carousel of Progress, and
Yeah.
that's a record that I have in the collection. And I was sharing with Beth a few days ago that I got this in the mail order version. And I'd only ever seen one for sale before. And it was like, does it really exist? And one popped up on eBay and I snatched it. But then I also, Disney just released Miracle of Molecules new record, but this is the old one.
It's funny how things pop up. I collect patches from my Boy Scout camp.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, and we had one patch for the Order of the Arrow, a big jacket patch that they made by mistake the wrong color. And it was not supposed to be released. And as you can imagine, if you make 200 of these things, half a dozen of them escape. And I had wanted one for years and years and years and years. And 2 weeks ago, a guy wrote to me that, hey, I saw on your page you're looking for this patch. And it usually goes for an insane amount of money. And I said, yeah, I'd like one, but well, it turned out he had been at some yard sale and there was the two of them sitting there. So I got it, and I made a really good deal with him, and I finally got it. And now he's got the other one for sale on eBay for an insane amount of money, and hopefully he gets it. But it's one of those things I've looked for 15 years, and all of a sudden it pops up out of nowhere. It's really, those little things are still out there and show up.
Does anybody else in this group collect records, Disney records specifically?
Tom
Besides
has
you and I?
a collection of Disney records, and I was suggesting to him that if people are interested, he could show some of the high points of his collection.
Yeah, I probably have one of the largest collections in the, it exists. It's massive.
How many would you say?
I don't know. I don't know. Definitely more than 3,000, but probably less than 5. So, but another friend of ours, Bill Morgan, he publishes a catalog, but I limit my collection to the Disneyland Records label and the Vista label, and and Disney Records. But he collects all the foreign titles, all the DECA, you know, EMI, RCA, all of them. And I have a lot of those, but I don't actively pursue them. I just grab them if I can get them for a buck or two, you know.
Yeah,
So,
I've got,
and our friend Greg Garbar, of course, has a bazillion.
yeah.
But so nobody else here
No,
collects
Ron
them?
Roxburgh's mentioning in the chat, I collect Disney records and have a Disneyland records blog. So take a
Oh,
look
cool.
at that. For my Disney record collection, I have some that are stamped on them, like Walt Disney Productions file copy, do not remove. And you know, you show it to somebody, think you stole it. Well, no, we worked in the it's called the Roy Disney Building. They had a huge archive of the records down below. And as they made more of them, they had a finite amount of space. At that time, Disney wouldn't go and rent anything off site. So they would come by and just say, does anybody want this stuff? And I got a bunch of foreign books that way and that sort of thing. But sometimes they would have had 4 or 5, library copies, and then they would decide get rid of one library copy. So I try to make as much friends as I could with the people that worked in that area. So.
I don't have anything to show, but I can say a few words about one of my prized possessions, which is probably worthless to anybody else, but it's another example of stuff that a company said, we have no use for it, we're dumping it. And this is the graphs of the color response of the original color TV cameras from RCA. And somebody who I know, who doesn't want to be named, when RCA Camden was being closed and they were just shoveling technical lab books and stuff into the dumpsters, he did the dumpsters diving and spotted that and knew that I was interested in color TV, and that was a big part of my career. So he sent it to me, and they're actually blueprints of the original hand plotted graphs of the color response of the early cameras. And it's interesting how these kinds of artifacts give you behind the scenes bits of things that were published elsewhere but didn't have these details. And it's actually possible, which I did, to calculate from these graphs how closely the response of the early cameras matched the early TV sets. And it turns out that the color reproduction was extremely accurate. It was much better than Technicolor or Kodak film. And as you research this, you also find things that are passed by in history. One of the things is the fact that the color splitting dichroic mirrors that were part of this optical system were designed by a female engineer in the late 40s and early 50s, when it was amazing to find a female engineer in any field. And you just find all these connecting things from one artifact. It's really pleasurable for me to connect these things together.
It's scary to think how much stuff is, that would be a treasure to any of us who are just tossed out. Years ago, I was doing a project at North American Rockwell in Seal Beach, and they were getting rid of a lot of their stuff from the Apollo program. And I was like, oh, wow, I'll take it. No, we can't give it to you. We have to destroy it for tax purposes. And there was just dumpster after dumpster of all this great manuals and technical drawings and stuff. And I asked, I said, does anybody have copies of this someplace else? And the guy, that's not my problem. My problem is clearing out this building. And it was just a shame to think how much stuff is lost that way.
Yeah, in terms of television engineering, when RCA Labs closed down, they some of the enthusiasts had about 3 or 4 days to investigate what was there, and in the basement they had the original lab books of Vladimir Zworykin, who developed a lot of the technology for RCA's 1939 World's Fair debut. And fortunately, a lot of that was rescued and resides at a university in New Jersey. But when I say a lot, it's probably 5%.
Yeah, are you on Facebook, Wayne?
No, I'm not.
There's a group on there called Eyes of a Generation, and it's all sorts of people with about vintage TV cameras, studios, all that sort of thing. And fascinating some of the stuff that people have these cameras in their living rooms now.
Right, yeah, I can't think of the guy's name who has the Eyes of a Generation website, which is really extensive, and I've seen all of the stuff on the website.
Yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Wayne. Appreciate it. Anybody else have anything they'd like to show?
And I have a TV that looks kind of like that one in your background. It's an old Hoffman from 1956 or 7.
Mhm.
But it probably doesn't get the same pictures that Wayne gets. He likes to Photoshop things in there.
I got something, Bill, if you're interested.
Sure.
Sorry, Joey, I cut you off.
I just wanted to tell Wayne that was fabulous. I loved it.
Go ahead, Don.
This is actually not theme park related. This is history related. My parents, my stepfather and my mom used to travel all over the place, and they attended an event which in that country no longer is acknowledged. The people who are alive don't know that it happened. They were touring China quite a while back, and most people know about the protest in, I never get the name of the square right.
Tiananmen Square.
Tiananmen Square. They were there during the time, and for some reason, the guides were all told to stay away. But somehow my stepfather, talked the tour guide into driving to Tiananmen Square. They drove there. They took part in the protests. This is a flag. I have 2 of these. I have a protest, and I'm trying to get out of my.
Wow.
Let me turn off the background 1 second. Whoops, sorry, that turned off everything. Let me see, choose virtual background, and should be an option. It demands I have a virtual background now. Virtual background.
While you're looking at that, you guys ever think about all the things that are destroyed every time there's a earthquake or hurricane or some big weather event or natural disaster? And I think about, oh my gosh, there's probably thousands and thousands of Disney records got destroyed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, things get, houses burned down and such, or natural disasters. This particular banner, if you watch the video accounts of it, the history here, you'll see this banner. It says free democracy. All the banner says. As far as I know, I don't know, I'm sure there are others, but what happened was the Chinese government came in and I have a protest sign downstairs too. They destroyed all of this. There's no record of that protest or their response in Chinese history now. So I have this, and I have a protest sign that my stepdad actually carried in the protests. One of their last days in China, the Chinese government allowed them to take him out of the country. I don't understand how that happened, but they got home and turned on TV one day later and watched the response as all those people were wiped out.
Well, that's something. Wow.
So I have this. If you'd like to see it, it would take me a moment to go downstairs to get it, but I actually have the protest sign they carried as well. I've got it framed and hanging in my living room. This one's going to be framed. But my plan is when my mom passes, I'll probably donate these to a museum somewhere because I haven't seen any other physical relics of that happening. They just happen to be in the right place at the right time. The act of being there for the guide was actually illegal, and he was panicked. I don't know why he allowed the bus to go there, but he hid on the floor in the bus so that none of the military would see him there. My stepdad just stepped out, started grabbing signs, and he was interviewed by CNN actually on the site. So, but I thought you might be interested in seeing it. It's just an interesting piece of history.
Don,
Love it,
We
Don.
visited Tiananmen Square, and their guide was telling us the Chinese emperor made this and all. I'm like, no, it was the Forbidden Kingdom. It was built by Genghis Khan. And he's
Mhm.
like, it was not. And I mean, I really felt like the next step was me in prison if I was to pursue, the real history of Tiananmen Square and, and the.
Oh yeah, you've got to be very careful. They have to be very careful what they say too. But the response was something that my stepdad noted, that he would get really adamant if you said anything that was outside the accepted history, because they can lose their license and they're always being watched. So the guides are very careful there about what they say and how they say it. Even
Don,
if
that's really interesting that you bring that up, because I worked on a project in Shanghai and we were talking about ancient Chinese history and why weren't they putting up pictures of the first star charts that they made in their museum. And they basically said, well, we know about them, but they're part of the dynastic history and we don't talk about that. And they're very honest about it.
Oh yeah.
They're not proud of it.
Yeah, but the government will clamp down hard if you step outside the message they're trying to present. So, but yeah, my mom was very upset. She'd been in there talking to those students, and she figures a lot of people that she met were gone once they clamped down. So,
Don,
yes.
how long were they permitted to stay in the square? How long were they there?
I don't know. The bus originally stopped a few blocks away, hoping to make my stepdad happy. And then they went on into the square. I doubt it was more than 15 or 20 minutes. It wasn't long. But unfortunately, my stepdad has passed, and my mom's memory for such things is not horribly accurate. She just doesn't have a good memory for details. But my guess is, just listening to the stories when I got a chance to hear them and see the photos, was 10 or 15 minutes, maybe 20.
The government probably did not want to touch any foreigners for fear of retribution, but they didn't care about their own.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I can absolutely promise you, had they begin to move in, they would have gotten on board the bus and gotten it out of there.
Oh yeah.
I still don't understand to this day how they even allowed it to get close. But that was, for a while, it was getting a lot of coverage worldwide, and you had to think about the students just standing in front of the tanks and everything. And I think they were trying to avoid looking bad for a while. So that may be why Wayne got away with it and got him in there.
Right spot at the right time.
Yep, right spot at the right time. So, like I said, I don't know if the Smithsonian or someplace like that would have an interest in that sign, but like I said,
I would not give that to a U.S. government museum, because they will probably catch flack from the Beijing government.
True enough. True.
I would give that to a university.
Yeah, well, the ransom center's right here. I've been talking with Wayne about it. I think they'd probably like it. So
definitely.
I have provenance for all of it. I have not only the items, but I have pictures of my parents carrying flags there carrying the items there in the square. So
that's good.
Yeah. So it's, yeah, you're right. Maybe the ransom center would be a better choice.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
I was thinking, I just realized I was here right next to these signs, so I thought I'd show them to you.
Yeah, that's great. I love it, Don.
Great. Anybody else have anything sitting in arm's length they'd like to show? Well, if we end for today, next week I'm going to, as I put on line, I intend to be in a turkey-induced coma. Carol is going to be making her usual Thanksgiving feast, and I will be enjoying it for several days. But I also know a lot of other people will be away doing things with family, that sort of stuff. So I'm going to skip next week, and then I think the week after I will do the Disney Western one. I was about ready to do it, but I had a video that was just resisting editing, and I will get that done in time for it. So wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and I hope for those of you that are anywhere near Lake Erie, it lets you go. And for the rest of the folks, Carolyn, I'm glad it's going to be up to 30 for you today.
Might be
Listening
50
as
by
we've
the
been
end of the
talking,
week.
our winds seem to have been dying down, so I got my fingers crossed. So hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving holiday.
You
Same
too,
to
Bill.
you, Bill.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Take care,
Bill.
everybody. Happy
Take care.
Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, everyone.